this is Paul with MakeUseOf.com, and today we're looking at the Zhiyun Weebill 3, one of the best compact gimbals that can actually support heavier payloads. For its size and price, this gimbal is extremely impressive. And throughout this review, I'll also be making a couple comparisons to my larger DJI Ronin RS2. They're not necessarily in the same category, but surprisingly, the Weebill 3 comes closer than I expected to matching the performance for a gimbal that retails for almost twice as much and is also much larger. And similar to my RS2, there's also the newer RS3 and RS3 Pro, which share a lot of similarities. And as I'll explain, the Zhiyun Weebill 3 does lack a few of those refined features that you find with the DJI options, but what you get instead is a significantly smaller, lighter, cheaper gimbal that also has a very impressive payload. But that's not to say this doesn't have a few unique features of its own. We've got the wrist pad here and the sling grip that, when used together, actually makes this one of the easiest gimbals to hold, especially for a longer period of time. You can actually manipulate and get better angles and more control over your gimbal with a combination of these two. And in addition to that, Zhiyun has also introduced a built-in 1000 lumens light as well as a microphone. You've got a mix of plastics and metals. Feels durable, feels very well constructed. I actually like how the axis locks are a little bit larger. So it's just a little bit easier to find with one hand, whether you're in the dark, you're doing it quickly. And together with these features, the Zhiyun Weebill 3 can be a really great choice for run and gun filmmaking. For $450, the standard kit includes the tripod feet, quick release plate, fill light filters, a lens support, a storage case, and a selection of charging and connecting cables for the camera. If you want to get these two additional accessories, that's available in the Pro bundle, which does retail for $530, so about $80 more than the standard kit. As it's one of the main selling features of this gimbal, you probably want to opt for that Pro bundle, though I did notice when you order the gimbal directly through Zhiyun, they sometimes run promotions where the wrist pad is included for free. I also noticed that they do sell it separately in the case that it's not. As of yet, at the time of this review, I haven't ever seen the sling grip offered separately, though I wouldn't be surprised if in the future they do offer that. And I think one of the most impressive things about the Zhiyun Weebill 3 that a spec sheet won't really tell you is how much you'll gravitate to using it. While my DJI RS2 is arguably a better gimbal with better features, I'm however finding myself using this gimbal more because of how small yet still very capable it is. While it won't be as smooth at handling larger lenses like my 2.6 pound Tamron 35-150, especially when it's fully extended out, its performance is about on par with more reasonable and typical setups. I mostly was using it with my Sony a7S III with a cage and a Sigma 24-70. And I found that the Zhiyun Weebill 3 was the more convenient choice over the DJI RS2 with this setup. And it's actually interesting because Zhiyun doesn't seem to officially state the max payload of this gimbal, but we can make a guess. As the Weebill 2 has a max payload of 3.3 kilograms or 7.3 pounds, it might be safe to assume that the Weebill 3 is somewhere in this range, if not a little bit better. I found that I was able to handle my setup, which with the cage and the Sigma 24-70 is probably about 3.9, maybe 4 pounds. At 70 millimeters, the Weebill 3 is still able to pan, tilt, and roll without issue. And even in underslung mode, the motor's actually kept up very well still, something that the Weebill 2 struggled with. With the a7S III and the Sigma 24-70, I think the Weebill 3 is about on par with the DJI RS2 for general use. Building off the Weebill legacy, the newest Zhiyun Weebill 3 continues to be one of the best compact and affordable gimbals that punches well above its weight class. And if you're familiar with the Weebill gimbals, you'll probably recognize that something's missing. The new 3 actually has removed its once iconic design, which had a sling grip or arm built right into it. It made it very easy to go into underslung mode. With the Weebill 3, they've removed it, which makes the gimbal lighter, but also a little bit more compact and easier to fold. Instead, to make up for that, we now have the grip, which can either be attached or removed or adjusted along the side here. Not only can it go up and down like that, but you can also adjust it pretty much to any angle you want as well. With the wrist pad, you can also make a few adjustments, though it's far more limited in that it only goes up and down like this. And that's plenty fine when it comes to finding a good angle that's comfortable for your wrist. I wish it actually could fold down a little bit more or fold up a little bit more, allowing it to be more compact when it came to folding up. While these two pieces are technically interchangeable, you can put this on the left and the wrist pad on the right hand side. The grip will work fine because it doesn't really matter. However, the wrist pad will be upside down, so that's definitely a downside. That brings us into my next point. You'll notice that we've got our joystick controls on the left-hand side, which definitely makes it more ergonomic, again, if you're a right-handed user, because your hand can naturally still hold very securely the gimbal while your thumb can reach for your joystick. Your right hand is intended for this wrist pad, so you're not going to get any benefit by holding this with your left hand. So the wrist pad's basically useless. You'll notice that you're not making as tight of contact with the handle when you're using your thumb to manipulate the joystick, which I think could potentially alienate some users, especially those who are left-hand dominant. Everything else is going to function quite similarly to other gimbals. There's nothing very unique there. I have my dial on the back here set to change my roll, so if my horizons ever looks a little bit off, or if I want to get a little bit more creative with my shot, I can do that too. But one thing that is unique though is this dial on the side here, which actually controls our light. And similar to the Crane M3, which is one of my favorite gimbals, you'll actually notice a couple similarities here, but also a few differences. One is that the joystick's on the front, which again makes it a little bit easier to use if you're ambidextrous or if you're a left-handed user. You also have that same dial I was just mentioning on the side here, which allows you to control the light, as well as your rear control and your rear finger trigger too. You also have a similar light setup on the front, although this is 800 lumens compared to 1000 lumens with the larger Weebill 3. Similar to the M3 though, this is also temperature controlled between 2600 Kelvin and 5400 Kelvin. You also have the same 4 magnetic plastic color filters to choose from, though I noticed when you apply them, it significantly reduces the strength of your light, so you might want to avoid it or just use it for subjects that are extremely close. I would only use this light if my subject is probably within a couple feet. Any further away, it's not strong enough to really offset the other source of light. If it's a darker room though, it can still be very beneficial to have. But with this being a smaller light source and it doesn't have very much diffusion, so depending on your subject, it might not be the most flattering unless again, you're careful. And while we're at it, let's actually show what the light looks like on me. So the light of the gimbal is now on. It's at 5400 Kelvin, which is what I set my main key light to. I'm gonna go ahead and turn that off so you can see what the difference is. And you can see even at 100%, it's not going to, be the brightest and it's not going to be the best for lighting your subject, but when you're in a pinch, it's a lot better than when it's off. So let's show what that looks like. Oh, but while I'm up here actually trying to mess with the controls, you can see, so about 3 feet away, it's not doing a lot. Once I'm within maybe a foot of the light, you're also hearing what it sounds like on the microphone, but it obviously lights me a lot better that way. Now what's cool is even though I can't see what I'm doing with my hands, the controls themselves are intuitive enough that it's not difficult to do like this. So at 10%, it's like it's not even on. So that's with the light completely off, and that's with the light at 100%. Better than no light, but obviously it can't replace a dedicated fill and key light. The benefit, of course, is when you don't have external lights or you don't have time to set one up, it's built right into the gimbal. I also found that it was extremely helpful to have when I was shooting weddings and mostly with first dances and cake cutting. I love just having it built in right into the gimbal. Another new addition for the Zhiyun gimbal is the built-in microphone. This is a noise-canceling hi-fi cardioid. Similar to the light, it's not going to blow you away, but when you need something, it's better than nothing. And so for a quick microphone demonstration, this is the audio coming straight from the Sony a7S III. And in just a moment, you'll hear what it sounds like coming from the Zhiyun Weebill 3, using its 2.5mm to 3.5mm cable, using its microphone. The camera is about 3 feet away, and that's where I'm going to put the Zhiyun Weebill 3. So you have the red icon on the side, and that's where you put the 2.5mm end. We're then going to plug this end into our camera. Now this is what the audio sounds like coming from the Zhiyun Weebill 3. You'll probably notice again that it sounds a little bit more muffled compared to the Sony a7S III. It's definitely not going to replace a dedicated shotgun microphone, but compared to your internal microphone of your camera, it actually has a few pros, but also has a few cons. And for indoor situations like this where we don't have a lot of ambient noise, it's probably not too beneficial, but if we were outdoors where it was a little bit windier, like we were saying, that's where a microphone like this would be a little bit better than the internal microphone of our camera. It sounds a little bit more muffled compared to your camera's microphone, but the benefit is it's a little bit better at filtering out unwanted noise, whether that's ambient noise or wind. The Weebill 3 has a 7800 mAh battery built into the grip, which provides up to a claimed 21 hours of use. You do have fast charging, which can charge the gimbal from 0 to 100% in just 2 hours, which is very impressive. It also supports pass-through charging to cameras, so that can also help keep your camera fully charged at all times. And when I'm filming longer shoots, weddings are a great example, I usually just have this always connected to a power bank, and then the gimbal itself is charging my camera, so I have one power bank charging both of my devices at the same time, which is very convenient. In my test though, I don't think I was getting anywhere close to 21 hours, at least with my setup. When I would shoot a 6-hour wedding, for example, I was able to end the day with approximately 50 to 60% charge left. And actually in those results, I wasn't using pass-through charging, so that doesn't affect the results. I just think with my heavier setup where I'm probably stressing the motors a little bit more and my movements are just a little bit more erratic, which also pushes the gimbal a little bit further. Maybe that's cutting down on the time, but I don't really see a practical application where you can get a full 21 hours out of this. But in my time using it, there are a few quirks that I've noticed, as well as a few things that I do miss from the larger DJI Ronin. And a point that I like to stress is even though you're within or under the max payload of a gimbal, that doesn't usually tell the full story. When following fast-moving subjects, I still felt that the RS2 could keep up a little bit better than the Weebill 3. And another area where I noticed that the motors weren't as strong was with inception mode, where it just couldn't spin the camera as quickly. And likewise, while the Weebill 3 is technically able to support my longer and heavier Tamron 35 to 150, at 150 millimeters, it's enough to throw off the center of gravity, which causes the gimbal to struggle far more. Even though this is one of the smaller gimbals and it's significantly smaller than my RS2, when you actually factor in that the grip is removable, this actually becomes a bit of a smaller gimbal. But another interesting thing that I noticed about this is without its tripod feet, this actually has a very hard time standing up on its own unless you have the wrist pad attached. As someone who just kind of likes to set their gimbal down on a table or flat surface when it's charging, or I'm just taking a bit of a breather, that's not going to be as easy to do with this gimbal. Similar to other newer gimbals, the Zhiyun Weebill 3 has its own proprietary quick release system. This is the quick release base, which slides on and then locks into place at the back here. You have your locking lever here, which will keep the camera from sliding along its main track. But the one point I want to mention though is with the shape of this quick release plate. This is kind of the standard size you would see with most other quick release plates that you normally would attach to like a tripod head, a fluid head. And you'll notice it's a good amount larger than this standard shape. The RS2 also has its own proprietary system, which only allows their specific quick release plate to work on their gimbals. However, the shape that they've used also allows their same attachment to work on more standard tripod heads and fluid heads again, because it's the same width. And so while I can't use any of my other accessories with the DJI RS2, my DJI RS2 accessories work with everything else, which is completely fine. I can just keep this on my camera at all times, and I know anything I attach it to will work. Unfortunately though, I quickly realized that this was going to be a limitation because I'm frequently switching my camera off my gimbal and putting it onto tripods or whatever else, and I can't do that with this. So I always need to carry an additional one of these anytime I go anywhere. And while yes, you can buy additional accessories to adapt them to more standard sizes, that's another purchase. It's another thing that could go wrong or something else that could go missing and potentially ruin a shoot. We no longer have the flip out touchscreen that was also a monitor that we saw on the Weebill 2. We now instead have this rather small, I think it's 0.96 inches, monochrome, non-touchscreen. In order to actually manipulate anything on screen, you have to use your menu button and your dials on the side in order to make changes. But of course, it's going to be far more limited than a screen that actually lets it be used as a view monitor. For example, if you use any of the additional accessories for live video transmission, you're now going to need to rely on a separate accessory as a view monitor, or you're going to need to use their Zhiyun ZY Play app in order to see what your camera sees. On the other hand, with the Weebill 2, it was built right into the gimbal, which was great. And likewise with my older RS2 and the newer RS3 and RS3 Pro, they do also have smaller screens, but they're color and you can actually use them as the view monitor, which is a huge plus for me because I'm frequently using the live video transmitter. So those are some of the quirks that you can expect with a gimbal like this. But on the other hand, one of the biggest benefits, of course, is that size. The fact that this is only about 13.5 inches tall and maybe about 8 or 9 inches wide, that's extremely compact. And so in many ways, one of the biggest strengths of the Weebill 3 is its simplicity. This allows the gimbal to be extremely compact and fast to set up and use. Removing the flip out screen and underslung arm from the Weebill 2 has made the Weebill 3 one of the smallest gimbals that can support semi-professional setups. You've got added features like the light and microphone, which are great when you're trying to pack light or minimize your setup weight. But what's more impressive though, and again one of the biggest selling features of this, is the wrist pad and the additional arm, which makes it easier to hold for a longer period of time and also control more smoothly. Though, as I explained, this is predominantly designed for right-handed users, and so if you're not one of those, this might not be the best choice. But with some of those trade-offs, again, we're able to get this more compact size. And one of the things I noticed quickly is I'm far more likely to pack the Weebill 3 than any of the other gimbals I've used before. Then that could make the Weebill 3 one of the best and most affordable choices that could support your camera. So thank you again for checking out this review. If you have any questions about the Weebill 3, let us know in the comments down below and we'll help you there. This has been Paul with MakeUseOf.com, and until the next one, we'll catch you later.